On this day in history, March 24, 1980, Óscar Romero, the Archbishop of San Salvador, was assassinated while celebrating Mass in a hospital chapel. His assassination would become a turning point in El Salvador's civil war, a prolonged, bloody conflict that lasted from 1980 to 1992. Today, we will explore the assassination of Óscar Romero and its impact on El Salvador. Óscar Romero was born in 1917 in El Salvador. He was ordained as a priest in 1942 and became Archbishop of San Salvador in 1977. Romero was initially seen as a conservative figure within the Catholic Church, but he became a vocal critic of the Salvadoran government's violent tactics and the killing of innocent civilians by the military, often at great personal risk. The Salvadoran Civil War was primarily fought between the government of El Salvador with the support of the United States against various left-wing rebel groups. The war was sparked by social and economic inequality, as well as government repression of opposition groups. According to the United Nations, an estimated 75,000 people died during El Salvador's civil war, with many more displaced or disappeared. In 1980 alone, over 3,000 Salvadorans were killed in political violence. The majority of those killed were civilians caught in the crossfire between the government and rebel forces. Romero's assassination was particularly devastating because he was seen as a unifying figure for the Salvadoran people. He was an outspoken advocate for the poor and marginalized, and his message of social justice and human rights resonated with many Salvadorans. After his assassination, there was an outpouring of grief and anger in El Salvador. Thousands of people took to the streets to mourn his death and demand justice. The government, however, did little to investigate his murder, and it was widely believed that the assassination was carried out by a right-wing death squad with ties to the military. The assassination of Óscar Romero was not an isolated incident. In the years following his death, numerous other religious figures and human rights activists were targeted by death squads. The Salvadoran Civil War ended with the signing of the Chapultepec Peace Accords on January 16, 1992. The peace agreement was negotiated between the Salvadoran government and the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, the main left-wing rebel group. Also known as the FMLN, the peace process was supported by the United Nations, the Catholic Church, and various other international organizations. The peace agreement called for a number of reforms, including land reform, increased political participation, and greater respect for human rights. It also established a Truth Commission to investigate human rights abuses committed during the war and to provide reparations to victims. Under the terms of the peace agreement, the FMLN became a political party and participated in democratic elections. The government also established a national police force to replace the military, which had been responsible for many of the human rights abuses committed during the war. In conclusion, the assassination of Óscar Romero was a pivotal moment in El Salvador's civil war. It was a tragic reminder of the violence and oppression that many people faced during this time. But Romero's legacy lives on as a symbol of hope and resistance. Romero's death galvanized a mass movement for social justice and human rights in El Salvador and around the world, and he is now widely regarded as a champion of human rights and social justice.